Hello and welcome back, rock stars. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Natty Rock, and today is part two of reading live Dracul. If you're part of our replay crew, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the first part. If you haven't watched that already, I would suggest watching that first. Um, if you're watching this on the replay, I suggest hitting that subscribe and that bell notification so that you can read it with us live every Thursday afternoon. So, anyways, it's gonna be a little bit shorter than usual. I'm gonna try to keep this to like a 30-minute stream just because I don't feel great. And I need to eat. So, we're gonna keep this a little bit short, but I'm really excited for it. Random updates for people. I just finished reading my very first James Bond book. I finished reading Casino Royale. Or I listened to the audiobook and kind of read along with the audiobook. It was so good. Um, I pretty much got it done in like 2 afternoons kind of a thing. Um, 10 out of 10 would recommend. I'm actually thinking about doing a video talking about Casino Royale just because it was such a good book. There's so much like very understated complexities to Bond's character, and it's not what I think people think of. The reality isn't the same as what people think of, like when they see like a spy book or a spy movie. There is like intricacies, there is layers to the character. And I also want to talk about the fact that like the book is very much a product of its time, and there are certain things that is not is frowned upon nowadays. And so I think it would be really interesting to talk about. I actually just started typing up some stuff about it earlier before I'd finished it, talking about some of the stuff that kind of is either outdated or just like kind of culturally frowned upon nowadays, but again, product of its time. So yes, we're gonna go ahead and start reading Dracul. I'm gonna give everybody a second to come on in. Let's see. Just gonna message in the Discord really quick. I'm gonna say hello. Crystal's in the chat. Hello, welcome, and said sending healing vibes. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I have a Screamin' Sicilian cheese pizza waiting for me in the freezer, and I cannot wait. Just want to eat it and go to sleep and hope that the headache doesn't further turn into a migraine. So Um, so yeah, that's what's been up with me. If you are interested in reading the James Bond books, they are actually seemingly, I don't know if all of them are on there, but at least the first two for sure are on Kindle Unlimited, and they include the audiobook, which is really nice, and it like reads along with the book. Ugh, I love it. 10 out of 10 would recommend. But again, I just want to remind you that there are some things, certain moments where you're like, ooh, you said that. You said that, didn't you? Like, it's not like overwhelmingly bad moments. Like, it's not terrible. There is one part that I was like, what the fuck? Um, why would you say that? Why would you? That was fucking a lot. But for the most part, it's like, okay, like you could see it was definitely a product of its time for most of the weird things that kind of happened. Which were not all the time. It was probably a handful of times in the whole book, and it was a over 4 hour audiobook. So anyways, I think we've given everybody enough time to come in if they're gonna come in. And let's get back onto Dracul. So last we read, we were learning about Bram Stokers' Nana Ellen, and this really weird dynamic that they had in between each other. We learned in the last one that Nana Ellen, when he was born, was in the room. She was 15 years old. She had said that she was, hungry and cold and out of work, and needed a place to stay and would be willing to work in exchange for a small compensation and room and board, essentially. You learn that Bram was I want to say the third child in the family, the baby of the family. Um, and you learn that when Bram was born, Nana Ellen was in the room, there was a doctor delivering, and the doctor thought that he was dead. And was just like, well, the baby's dead, the baby's dead. And Nana Ellen was like, no, he's not, and did some stuff, kind of started like messing with him and doing God knows what, and all of a sudden he was alive. And from then on out, there is this back and forth of Bram being sick, Nana Ellen like looking like she's getting the life sucked out of herself, saving him from being so sick, disappearing for a few days, coming back looking super chipper and great and like nothing ever happened. And the cycle repeating over and over and over again in his childhood years. And then we kind of get to the point where things don't seem right with Nana Ellen, and him and his sister speak. And his sister is an excellent artist where she did portraiture even though she was like 7 years old. She did portraits that looked identical and just incredibly spot on to the person that it was she was drawing. And no matter how many portraits of Nana Ellen she would draw, it just didn't come out right. She had 20 or so portraits of her, and they were all kind of like, but like, other than that, it just wasn't quite right. It just wasn't adding up. Something was weird about it. And so that's kind of where we left off, and we're on this teeter totter of his journal versus present moment of him seemingly trying to save his life and keep something at bay. So that is where we've been at. We are now on page 32, and we are going to be reading about what is happening right now in the present moment. As I said, last we saw in the present moment, he has been doing some weird stuff, kind of some uh very Catholic Christian kind of practices. There's this red rose and some, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something kind of church-ish. um Kind of just declaring against the evil that he's trying to keep at bay. So that is where we're going to continue from. All right. Now, Bram glances up from his journal. He heard breathing, thick, ragged gasps, followed by a huff of air against the opposite side of the door. The petals of the rose fluttered silently over the stone floor. One petal broke away, black with rot and shriveled with decay. It skimmed across the floor and landed at Bram's feet. The remainder of the rose had not fared much better. He would have to replace it soon. The breath comes again, long this time, an exhale from monstrous lungs. It sounds like a horse or a large dog, but that cannot be right, for he knew there was no such animal here. Yet he hears it, each inhale and exhale louder than the last. He pictures huge nostrils, those of a Great Dane or Mastiff, at the base of the door, inhaling with such force and purpose that it could identify everything in the room from scent alone. Bram sets the journal on the floor, stands and crosses the room to the door. The presence on the other side must know he is near, for the breathing ceases momentarily, then resumes again, this time with more haste. Bram lowers his face to the floor and tries to look under the door, but there is little space. Only a hair's breadth between the stone floor and the bottom of the thick oak barrier. Then comes another exhale, and Bram shuffles back. The air is hot and filled with moisture, and the dampness brushes against his cheeks as it rushes past, followed closely by the most abhorrent of odors. His eyes water just at the scent of it, and he tries to back away farther still, until his legs clatter against the chair he occupied moments earlier. The stench enfolds him, and he wants nothing more than to leave. Instead, he rises and goes to the window and sticks his head out into the cold night air, taking it in until the stink washes away from his nose and lungs. At the door, the breathing continues, louder still. Bram reaches into the pocket of his coat and retrieves a small vial and holds it up to the flickering light of the oil lamp. Vanbury had filled the vial, along with 4 others just like it, only 2 days earlier from the font at St. John the Baptist. 2 are gone now. After this one, only a single vial will remain, and Bram will have no means to get more. Carefully, he removes the stopper and crosses the room. Again, the presence on the other side falls silent for a second as he approaches, then resumes its rhythmic breathing. A low growl follows, then a scratching at the stone, a single, tentative scratch, as if its maker is testing the strength of the stone beneath its feet. Bram kneels at the door and cautiously tips the vial, spilling the holy water in a straight line, from one end of the threshold to the other, and back again until none remains. The slate seems to drink it up. For the moment it makes contact, the liquid vanishes, leaving nothing behind but a thin trail. Behind the door, the creature scuttles back. Then comes the deep wail of a great wolf. The Journal of Bram Stoker, October 1854. I woke to muted light, gray beams of sun streaming in through my 3 windows and flooding my little attic room with a glow that was neither daylight nor dusk. I assumed fog had rolled in off the harbor. This time of year it was known to do so. There was a moistness in the air too, and although someone tucked the bedsheets in around my entire body, they did little to fend off the bite of the sea as it snatched at me. The birdsong told me it was early morning. It hurt to open my eyes, but I did so anyways. The bowl that Ma had used to moisten my brow sat on the table at my side along with the cloth, but the chair beside my bed was vacant. I expected to find Ma there, or Matilda, but neither occupied it. I was alone in my attic room. If Uncle Edward was still in the house, there was no sign of him. His bag was gone, and along with it the horrific jar of leeches. I brushed the bedclothes to the side and forced myself to sit up, holding my arm up to the light. Marks began at my wrists and worked up to my shoulders of both arms, dozens of 3-point punctures. I found similar marks on my legs, beginning on my thighs and continuing to my feet. How many leeches had he used? I could not help but wonder. I thought I might be ill, but forced myself to choke back the vomit. Although I was cold, it was not the cold I had known the night before, while fighting the fever. In truth, I only assumed it was the night before, for I had no way of knowing for sure. The last time I succumbed to such a violent attack, I slept for 3 full days before regaining consciousness and rejoining the living. When I awoke after that episode, I was famished, as if I hadn't eaten in days. What little energy my body typically harbored had abandoned me. I could barely sit up, let alone stand. This time I felt weak, to be sure, but not as weak as I had on that previous occasion. In fact, it was the opposite, like I could climb out of the bed and venture across the room if need be, as if I had emerged from a great sleep, a bear emerging from hibernation and turning to the world. I reached for the little bell on my night table and gave it a shake. Ma appeared at my door moments later, a breakfast tray in hand. "And how are you feeling this morning?" she asked as she settled the tray on the table beside me. "You gave us quite the scare last night. Your fever exceeded all others in recent memory. I honestly feared you were in danger of combusting while you slept. Your skin was so hot." "What of Nana Ellen? Is she here?" I said in a voice not quite my own. "She is indeed." Ma's eyes glanced down the hall to Ellen's door. "What do you recall of last night?" I tried to remember the events of the night before, but it was a dismal blur at best. I vaguely recalled my fever growing worse, then little more until the arrival of Uncle Edward. Uncle Edward bled me. Ma sat at the edge of the bed and folded her hands in her lap. "That he did, and a good thing too. The fever had taken a deep hold on you, And if he had not arrived when he did, there's no telling what would have come of you. Edward is a blessing on us all, and you owe him quite a debt. I expect you to tell him so when you next see him. But it was Nana Ellen who really helped me, was it not? Ma shuffled where she sat, her fingers twisting nervously together. Your uncle is to thank for your recovery, nobody else. It was his competency that put an end to your fever. To say otherwise is nothing more than conjecture, and I will hear no such talk. Her eyes fluttered back to Nana Ellen's closed door down the hall. I'm beginning to wonder why we allow the woman to remain in our house, disappearing for days at a time and returning according to her own timetable and whim. I require somebody dependable when it comes to tending you and the other children, not an unpredictable, flighty vagabond. I plan to speak to your father about her. Perhaps a change is overdue. She was clearly aggravated, and I did not wish to agitate her further, so I changed the subject. Is Uncle Edward still here? He left with the rising sun, I'm afraid. He slept downstairs for a few hours, but was due back at his work in the early hours and could stay no longer. He was kind enough to check back in on you once before he left and told me your condition improved greatly. A miraculous recovery, he said. Ma turned and over her shoulder loudly announced, Matilda, your brother is awake! Matilda poked her head around the corner of my door. She had been standing there the entire time. Why, you little snoop, Ma explained. I'm going to take Bram's bell and tie it around your neck. Matilda blushed. I wasn't snooping, Ma. Ma tilted her head. I am to believe you were just standing in the hallway outside of your brother's door simply because it was a comfortable place to rest your feet? Matilda opened her mouth to speak, then thought better of it. Down the hall, baby Richard began to wail, and Ma pursed her lips. That child will be the death of me. Stay with your brother for a moment. With that, Ma left the room, and Matilda took her place on the edge of the bed. Reaching for the breakfast tray, she plucked up a piece of toast and crammed it in her mouth, then handed the remaining slice to me. The bread was slightly stale, and I wasn't very hungry, but I ate it anyways. When I was sure Mom was out of earshot, I spoke in a low voice. What happened with Nana Ellen last night? Matilda, too, looked down the hall for Ma before responding. You don't recall? I shook my head, my neck stiff and sore. She came back early to help me, did she not? Matilda whispered. Nana Ellen walked you back from the gates of hell last night and rescued you from the devil's touch. Of this I am sure. But Uncle Edward tried his best, and your condition worsened with each passing hour. But Nana Ellen, she somehow what? What did she do? The wounds from the leeches began to itch, and when Matilda saw me scratching them, she held both my hands in her own. What she did took place behind closed doors, but when she emerged an hour later, it was clear your fever had broken and the danger past. But she spoke nothing of her methods, despite Pa and Uncle Edward's queries. Instead, she walked from your room to her own and closed the door without so much as a single word. Uncle Edward beat on her door for nearly 5 full minutes before finally giving up and returning to your side, only to see that what Ma and I were already seeing. The sweats from your fever were gone, and you were resting peacefully in this very bed. Still and quiet, only the rise and fall of your chest to tell us you were still amongst the living. Matilda glanced at Nana Ellen's closed bedroom door. She rests in there still. She leaned in close. I saw Thornley bring something to her after she left your room. A large bag. Something inside was moving. She opened before he knocked, opened it only enough to take the bag, then closed the door behind her. That is ridiculous. That is what I saw. You must have been dreaming. She defiantly crossed her arms. I saw it. I examined the wounds running the length of my arms, turning them in the light. Does it hurt? Matilda asked. I was sore, and I knew from past experience it would take days before I would heal. And I told her so, although the wounds seemed to be healing faster this time, already scabbing over and itching something fierce. Her voice dropped even lower to a hush barely above the birdsong outside. "There is more. When Nana Ellen first arrived last night, when she shouted for all of us to leave your room, she looked like herself, a young, healthy woman. But when she emerged from your room, she was anything but. It was like she aged a dozen years in those minutes she was in here. Her face had gone pale and dry, her hair limp and brittle. Her eyes were those of an old woman. I caught a glimpse of them as she shuffled into her room, but only a glimpse, for she turned away and shielded her face behind the shadows as she rushed past and closed the door on us." "What color were they?" I asked her, already knowing her response. "Blue as the sea," when she answered, "the deepest gray when she left." "So it's happening again?" Matilda nodded. Ma returned with a glass of claret and handed it to me. "I nearly forgot. Uncle Edward said you are to drink this the moment you awake." I was not typically fond of claret. I didn't develop a taste for wine until later in life, but I knew from past experience the drink would quicken the return of my strength, what little I had in those days anyways. I took the glass in hand and forced the liquid down without so much as a single breath between gulps. The wine was warm and dry, and not entirely horrible to my young palate, but alcohol nonetheless, and I quickly felt the effects wash over me. I returned the glass to Ma, who eyed me curiously. "You must be dehydrated," I thought. "I thought I would have to fight you to get it all down." After witnessing that, I'm beginning to wonder if perhaps this sickness of yours is nothing more than a hangover that you have been sneaking off to the pubs at night." She said this with a twinkle in her eye. I knew it was in jest. I couldn't help but smile at her. "How else will I ever perfect my game of cribbage?" This earned a laugh, and she ruffled my hair. "That sense of humor of yours is going to get you in trouble one day, but it's good to hear its return. I was quite worried last night. That may be the worst you have ever been." She placed her hand on my forehead. "The fever seems to be broken, though. You're still a little warm to the touch, but nothing like earlier. I could have boiled a pot of water on that head of yours." "He does have a big head," Matilda chimed in. I swatted at her and missed, nearly knocking the tray off the table. Ma plucked my hand from the air and held it in her own, her eyes filling with tears. "I prayed to the Lord above all day and all night that your suffering would come to an end, that your illness would finally abate. Let us hope Uncle Edward chased the demons from you." I knew he had not. While I felt better, I could sense the illness brewing within me, dormant for now but prepared to return. The achy feeling in my bones, the fatigue and the lightheadedness, it had been subsided, nothing more. Give me 1 second, guys, sorry. Sorry about that, guys. Um, I don't even know where I was. I am gonna stop really soon, just so you guys know. Um, I'm gonna grab a couple comments since I paused. Crystal said, "Hydrate." I'm going to do that. I need to do that for sure. Um, John's here. Welcome, John. Uh, yours are silly. This is like a very long chapter, apparently. Where was it that I saw that it stopped? This is like, I wish I would have stopped it now and then read, or stopped after now, because it's literally like hecka long. It starts at page 34 and ends on page 67, so it's a long ass chapter. And we're on 39 right now. So I'm gonna read a few more pages and then I'm gonna probably head out for the night. Mm-mm-mm. I knew he had not. While I felt better, I could sense the illness brewing within me. Dormant for now, but prepared to return. The achy feeling in my bones, the fatigue and lightheadedness. It had been subdued, nothing more. He hasn't told yet, Ma, Matilda pointed out, once again perched upon my bed. Perhaps we should give him time to regain his strength, young lady. If she doesn't tell now, if he doesn't tell now, he'll never remember, she replied. Ma knew this to be true, a fact she reminded us of. Dreams are much like the sand in an hourglass, lessening with each passing second, until the last grain disappears below a hole, disappears down a hole, and is lost forever in the dark. For as long as I could remember, the three of us shared our dreams, recounting them to one another to the best of our recollection. I would sometimes record them. I kept a journal at my bedside just for this purpose. I would write them down the moment I woke, knowing if I waited even a little while they would fade, just as Ma always told us they would, and the details would become increasingly difficult to pluck from memory. I hadn't yet taken the time to transcribe last night's dream, and I wasn't sure I wished to. Unlike regular dreams, fever dreams were extraordinarily vivid. Matilda knew this, which is why she prodded me with such insistence now. And while a normal dream really did fade shortly after waking, fever dreams burned into the mind. I didn't even want to close my eyes for fear of returning to that ugly blackness which engulfed me amidst the worst of last night. I remember being buried alive so clearly that I could taste the dirt and hear the worms as they burrowed inches from my head, hungrily awaiting the rank meal I was to become. I don't want to, I protested sheepishly. Was it frightful? Matilda inched closer, her face beaming. Oh, do tell, Bram! My eyes drifted from Matilda to Ma, then back again. Ma had once told me if we speak of the devil in our dreams, he loses his power to harm us. So, with a sigh, I told them of my burial. I recited all I could recall. When it was all over, I realized Matilda had drawn closer while Ma looked on without a word. Was your grave amongst the suicides? Matilda asked. At this, Ma frowned. What do you know of the suicide graves? My sister's mind tried to calculate a way to expand on this without betraying the fact that she'd been listening in on what was no doubt a private conversation between Ma and Pa. But before she could bring forth some elaborate lie, Ma spoke again. You were eavesdropping on your father and me yesterday, were you not? I was only walking past and may have heard the mention of a suicide graves, but I did not continue listening. That would be wrong. Yes, it would be very wrong. But the men in town really Did the men in town really bury a man alive in the graveyard? I asked. Ma drew in a deep breath. If it's true, Horton Lowell and the constable found no evidence of it yesterday afternoon when they went out to the old graveyard after hearing talk of the burial in town. I have no doubt the story was simply the production of someone's overactive imagination passed from one gossip to the next until it garnered a life all its own. She turned to Matilda. Gossip is not a slight bit better than eavesdropping, and I best not find you doing either in the future, or you'll catch a switch on that pasty white backside of yours. I laughed, which quickly turned into a cough. Ma poured me a glass of water and I drank it eagerly. My throat felt raw, as if I had chewed on stones and swallowed the bits. Ma continued, "The famine has taken a toll on many of our countrymen. In Dublin, the sick and homeless are dying in the streets. The poor are robbing the poor. Men who once worked their own fields are begging on corners in order to scrape together food for their families. Don't ever underestimate what a man will do to put food into the mouth of his starving children." "Pa says it's getting better," I said. "Sometimes I think your father prefers to believe the rhetoric preached among the aristocrats at the castle. They want us to believe the famine is coming to an end, so they stand around telling one another it is, but speaking of such things does not make them fact." Ma looked down at her hands. "I think things will get far worse before they get better. So when I hear that a sick man was buried alive, I don't dismiss it as fiction straight away. I know firsthand what evil men will do when frightened. When I was a little girl and cholera ran rampant, I witnessed men do far worse than bury a single sick soul." "Was cholera worse than the famine?" "I don't know if one death is better or worse than another, Matilda. Both will kill without prejudice." Matilda spoke, her voice thin and sheepish. "Is that what will become of us here? Is everyone going to die?" "The famine is different, Matilda. There is sickness, yes, but nothing like cholera. Most of the ill you behold are suffering from starvation and dehydration. Men drinking themselves into a stupor, having failed to provide for their families. It is horrific to be sure, but a very different beast." She patted our knees. "Enough of this talk. We have much to do today, and I have a feeling Nana Ellen will not be offering her help." The three of us glanced down the hall to Nana Ellen's sealed door. Ma stood. "Matilda, be a dear and gather today's eggs." Matilda wrinkled her nose. "It's Thornley's turn." "Your father sent him to the Seaver cottage in Santry for a load of peat for the fire. We're nearly out, you know, and the nights are soon to grow frigid with the approach of winter." Matilda eased off the bed and thumped down the hall without another word. Ma placed her hand upon my forehead and smiled. "God has smiled upon you, my little man." My eyes remained fixed on Nana Ellen's door, the images of last night still playing in the theater of my mind. And with that, I will close Dracul for tonight, I should say. We're on page 43. I feel like this is a good place to stop because there's a time jump, which you can't see because the page is white. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it was shorter than usual. But it's just one of those nights. So thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you guys in the next one. Hopefully, for some true crime stuff. I think Sunday, if you guys are available, if you guys want to help me out, I would love to talk about Summer Wells's case and finish getting together that. So if you guys are down to talk about that on Sunday in the Discord, I would really appreciate it. Yeah, let me know if you guys are down for that. And I will see you guys really soon. You're welcome, Crystal. Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate you. All right, guys. I hope you guys have a really good night. We are one day from Friday. We are like a week and a half. No, not even. We're a week away officially from Thanksgiving. So I hope you guys are not freaking out because I'm pretty much probably due for that soon. So, anyways, thank you guys again. I will see you guys really soon. Stay safe out there, and I will see you guys.